We're going to be signing today and registering national emergency. And it's a great thing to do because we have an invasion of drugs, invasion of gangs, invasion of people, and it's unacceptable. It's very simple. We want to stop drugs from coming into our country. We want to stop criminals and gangs.
So the big question, where does this $8 billion actually come from? $1.33 billion is actually included in the government funding bill that was just passed yesterday. But the president can't use any of that money for a concrete wall. Now, it can be used for things like fencing, bollard fencing, steel slats, but no concrete. $2.5 billion will be reallocated from the Pentagon's drug interdiction program. $600 million will come from the Treasury's forfeiture funds. The largest check, $3.6 billion, comes from the Defense Department's military construction budget. Now, Democratic leadership, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Senate Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer say, quote, Congress cannot let the president shred the Constitution. They and many of their colleagues vow to fight this. And in today's announcement, the president made it pretty clear he expects some legal challenges.
And we will have a national emergency, and we will then be sued, and they will sue us in the Ninth Circuit, even though it shouldn't be there. And we will possibly get a bad ruling, and then we'll get another bad ruling, and then we'll end up in the Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll get a fair shake, and we'll win in the Supreme Court. Just like the ban, they sued us in the Ninth Circuit, and we lost, and then we lost in the appellate division, and then we went to the Supreme Court, and we won.
And joining me now to talk about this more, look, it was funny. All right, but seriously, joined by CNN Supreme Court reporter Ariane DeVogue. And okay, it was funny, but the hypothetical process going forward the president laid out, Ariane, you've been talking to a lot of legal experts on this, a lot of lawyers on this. Is that realistic? Is that kind of how you see this happening in the weeks and months ahead?
Well, it is. And Phil, I've learned that already one lawsuit is in the works. It could be several hours away, but they are starting. These liberal lawyers, they have been on the phone, burning the phone lines from last night. Keep in mind, they are veterans of the Trump administration and these policies. They've been through the travel ban, the asylum ban, the effort to push back DACA. They are ready to go. And there's a broad variety of people who can try to bring suit. For instance, states. Counties, cities. We've already seen El Paso talking about maybe that they would push forward. Then there's the House, Nancy Pelosi. Her lawyers have been working around the clock on this. There are contractors, people who thought they were going to get these funds maybe, and they didn't get them. And then there's these property owners who may have a legal argument. But I have to say, what the biggest fear for the conservatives are going into this is this new, relatively new judicial phenomenon, which is nationwide injunctions. And they were fearful if the Trump administration moved this way, they would get slammed immediately in a favorable court ruling that would stop the policy in its tracks. So that's what they are going to be looking for. They fear that it's going to happen. And as you saw it, the president laid it out there. He said he sees it going through the courts. He sees probably it going to California, that Ninth Circuit that he so criticizes, and that's where that could be the next step, and that's where we think that we could see one of these injunctions.
Yeah, I think you're going to be busy over the course of the next couple of months, Ariane. No, it's a really great point. There's kind of a roadmap that's been laid out that a lot of these lawyers can almost subscribe to in the coming months and maybe even years. Ariane DeVogue, thank you very much. All right, here with me now to share their reporting and insights, CNN's Caitlin Collins, Jonathan Martin of the New York Times, Franco Ordonez with McClatchy, and Margaret Talev with Bloomberg. So, look, one of the things when you talk to lawyers, when you talk to lawmakers, and I know you guys have all been talking to administration officials as well, is there's a lot of ambiguity in kind of what a national emergency declaration means. Traditionally, they're not this contentious. Traditionally, there's not an immediate backlash to one. I want to play something that the president said about whether or not he actually needed to do this right now, which would seem to be the crux of declaring a national emergency. Take a listen.
I want to do it faster. I could do the wall over a longer period of time. I didn't need to do this. But I'd rather do it much faster. I just want to get it done faster, that's all.
That would seem to undercut to some degree, Margaret.
Good
President, pick up on things. You know, I didn't go to law school to the disappointment of my parents, but I'm a little quick. But But that would seem to undercut the central premise, or central legal theory, at least, of declaring a national emergency. You're talking to the White House. Is that what's the read or explanation for this?
It was truly like the first of many gasp moments of that news conference. But no, but that's absolutely right. And I think we don't know yet. We know that Mitch McConnell was very resistant to the president doing this. That behind the scenes he tried to talk him out of it, and that the president, felt that, whether you want to say for policy reasons or for political reasons, that he was committed to declaring an emergency. So the question is now, will it hold up? And there was one point before he said, I didn't need to do this, where the president said, we have a chance at getting as much as $8 billion, a chance. And I found that very telling, because it was the president sort of on the front end of this news conference saying, you know what, at least I can say I tried.
And Caitlin, I think that's what, you take us behind the scenes better than most, particularly here at CNN. Do administration officials feel like they've got $8 billion in the bank right now and they can go to work? Or do they know that this could get held up, this might not ever come to fruition at all?
They feel like they've got about $1 billion in easy money that they can get without some kind of a big legal fight. McMulvaney was talking to reporters about that this morning, talking about how much money he could get. What's interesting that what the president kept saying throughout those remarks in the Rose Garden was that he's going to get so much money through declaring a national emergency, and he said it's going to be so much money he doesn't know what to do with all of it, which raises the question of why would they allocate funds if the president doesn't have a specific purpose for what he wants to use them for. And it's much higher than the $5.7 billion he demanded from Congress. And when he demanded that from Congress, he was citing numbers from CBP, from DHS, saying this is how much money they need to be able to secure the border. So why would they go for so much more money if they're declaring a national emergency?
It's really interesting. And part of the reason why, we think, is that even if the courts allow him to move at this pace, that money is restricted. Even if you declare an emergency, that money is restricted in the ways that it can be used. So it might actually take closer to $8 billion to get 234 miles of fencing than it could if you just had a $5.7 billion appropriation from Congress.
One of the interesting things I think I've picked up on Capitol Hill, and Caitlin's heard a lot about it too, is kind of the concern, particularly from conservatives, about precedent here. And I want to play some sound from the president where he talks about the fact that, look, national emergency has been declared by lots of people. Take a listen.
It's been signed by other presidents. From 1977 or so, it gave the presidents the power. There's rarely been a problem. They sign it. Nobody cares. I guess they weren't very exciting, but nobody cares. They sign it for far less important things in some cases, in many cases.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't very exciting because they were traditionally emergencies and
right.
people were reacting to that. And I was struck a couple weeks ago, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who behind the scenes had been pretty opposed to this and had been warning the president about kind of the danger within the party of doing this, made clear publicly, he's like, look, this will be very contentious, which is not normally how this is supposed to be. And I guess, Franco, my question to you is the administration's calculation here that the fight is worth it? Right, the fight is worth it no matter what the end game is.
That is a big part of the calculation. Like, this is very much seen as a potential off-ramp to get this issue off their table, as Margaret was saying, to be able to say, at least we tried. And look, I mean, there is some truth to that. Maybe he can do that. I mean, we have reported about the more than 100 statutory powers that the president has. The sources that I've talked to tell me that Congress has given the president too much power to do these kind of things. And there's no question that the Ninth Circuit will most likely get it. I've talked to sources who tell me the briefs are already being written, and they will be submitted within days. And he'll likely lose there. He'll likely lose in other courts. And as he said, he won the travel ban at the end in the Supreme Court. He now has a more favorable Supreme Court there.
Look, when Trump won the nomination and then the presidency in 2016, it was revealing in a lot of ways. And one of the major ways to fill it was, I think, revealing was it proved that the base of the party didn't really care that much about matters of small government conservatism, right? That a handful of people did in the sort of intelligentsia of the party, but really that's not a priority. And I think this, once again, demonstrates that. To him, taking the PR hit for not getting his wall is far worse than offending whatever sort of small government purists exist on the right when it comes to, in their eyes, misusing a national emergency. And look, and he may lose some votes from the right and the Congress, but I think most of them are more concerned about keeping their Trump-loving base happy than sticking to whatever, pre-Trump era small government principles they purported to have. He was never invested in the movement, Trump himself, obviously. But what he has really revealed here is just how little a lot of the voters on the right care themselves about these principles of small government conservatism.
And that's really been the thinking inside the White House for the last few weeks, because this national emergency didn't come out of nowhere. They've been preparing for this since the president signed that short-term spending bill 3 weeks ago. They knew that they did not think that conference committee was going to get the president the money he wanted, so they have been preparing for this behind the scenes, preparing for their legal arguments and what they're going to say. And they know they're going to face legal battles over this, and it could get tied up in the courts, but they don't care about that, because all they can say is, well, Congress didn't get us the money, so the president had to declare a national emergency, and here we are fighting for the wall. And they think that's enough for the president's supporters.
Yeah, it's a great point. This isn't ad hoc. I know White House staff, White House legal operation has been working on developing, you've been reporting a lot of that, has been working on developing this for months. It doesn't mean it's going to actually go through, but they have been working on this. This has been a very serious effort on their part.